There's a moment that changes everything you think you know about yourself. For thousands of Romanians in recent years, that moment has arrived in an email, a simple notification. Your DNA results are ready. The numbers appear on the screen: Eastern European, Balkan. Expected results, familiar categories. But then, scrolling down, something impossible appears. Scandinavian, 8%, 12%, sometimes more. Hands tremble holding phones across Bucharest, Cluj, Constanța. The same confused whispers rise in different apartments. How is this possible? My family has been Romanian for generations. How could I be part Viking? Social media fills with confused posts and DNA screenshots. Comment sections explode with similar stories, and a pattern becomes undeniable. Something in Romanian blood connects to the frozen north, to longships and Norse sagas, to a world that seems impossibly distant from the Carpathians and the Danube. The questions multiply. Old family stories return, tales of unusually tall ancestors with light hair. Genealogy websites reveal unexpected cousin matches in Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. Ancient haplogroups with Nordic origins appear in modern Romanian profiles. Tonight, a mystery written in blood will be revealed: how Viking DNA travelled over 2,000 kilometres from Scandinavian fjords to Romanian soil, and the truth is far more extraordinary than simple invasion or conquest. Understanding this mystery requires understanding what DNA reveals. Every cell contains genetic markers that record the movements, migrations, and mixings of ancestors stretching back thousands of years. DNA testing searches for haplogroups, genetic signatures, passed down nearly unchanged through generations. These markers reveal ancient journeys, settlements, and unions that shaped modern populations. Romanian DNA is one of Europe's most complex puzzles. The country sits at a crossroads where continents meet, where civilizations collided, and where every major migration left its mark. To the north lies Scandinavia, to the south the Mediterranean, to the east the Asian steppes, and to the west Central Europe. Romania is not near these crossroads, it is the crossroads. A woman from Constanța learns her haplogroup is I1, a distinctly Scandinavian marker. Somewhere in her family tree, perhaps only a few generations back, a Scandinavian ancestor lived, loved, and passed on their genes. A man from Bucharest carries haplogroup R1, a -Z282, found in both Slavic and Viking populations. His grandfather spoke of ancestors tall like giants with light hair. The family dismissed these tales, but perhaps they were memories preserved through blood. The question intensifies: how did Viking DNA travel so far south? To answer it, we must journey back through time, to understand who Romanians truly are, where their DNA originates, and what ancient peoples combined to create the modern Romanian identity. 35,000 years ago, in a cave in southwestern Romania, one of Europe's earliest modern humans lived and died. The cave yielded the oldest anatomically modern human bones found in Europe. These ancient people lived during the Upper Paleolithic, when woolly mammoths roamed and glaciers covered the north. They hunted in Romanian valleys, sheltered in the Carpathians, and survived in a harsh primordial world. In 2015, scientists extracted DNA from these bones and found evidence of recent Neanderthal ancestry. One individual had a Neanderthal ancestor only 4 to 6 generations back. His great-great-great-grandfather may have been Neanderthal. These were the first Romanians, hunter-gatherers who survived the Ice Age with extraordinary resilience. Their DNA still flows through modern Romanian veins, carried through thousands of generations. As the Ice Age ended, new peoples arrived, farmers from Anatolia bringing agriculture, and Bronze Age warriors from the steppes bringing Indo-European languages. Romanian DNA layered like geological strata. From this mixture emerged the Thracians, and in the north, the Dacians. 2,000 years ago, a powerful kingdom ruled from the Carpathian Mountains. The Dacians built sophisticated fortresses, created advanced metallurgical workshops, and produced treasures admired across the ancient world. Their images survive on Trajan's column: warriors with curved falx swords, nobles wearing distinctive pileus caps. Their faces carved in stone gaze across millennia at their modern descendants. Genetic studies confirm continuity between ancient Thracian Dacian populations and modern Balkan peoples, including Romanians. The ancient population was not replaced, they survived. But something changed between the Dacian era and modern Romania. The catalyst was Rome. In 106 AD, Rome conquered Dacia. What followed was a massive population transfer. Italians, Gauls, Greeks, Syrians, and North Africans flooded into the province. New cities were built, Latin became the spoken language, and Roman culture blended with Dacian identity. Romans married Dacians, their children became Romano-Dacians, speaking Latin flavoured by older Dacian influences. When Rome withdrew in 271 AD, the people remained, still carrying their mixed Romano-Dacian identity. Then came the migration period, centuries of upheaval as Goths, Huns, Avars, Bulgars, and many other peoples passed through or settled in Romanian lands. Each group contributed genes to the growing mosaic, but the most transformative movement was the Slavic migration between the 6th and 9th centuries. The Slavs arrived not as conquerors, but as settlers in massive numbers. They mixed deeply with Romano-Dacian populations. Today, approximately 55% of Romanian genetic ancestry traces to Slavic sources. Romanian language absorbed hundreds of Slavic words, and culture blended deeply with Slavic traditions. By 900 AD, the Romanian people as we know them had formed, a mixture of ancient Dacian-Thracian roots, Roman colonist influence, Germanic contributions, Turkic elements, and a powerful Slavic component. Modern DNA analysis confirms this complexity. The most common Romanian haplogroup is E2A, representing deep Balkan ancestry. It is ancient, predating the Vikings, yet also present in Scandinavia, revealing a shared distant heritage. The second major haplogroup is R1A, especially the Z282 branch, strongly associated with Slavic migrations but also present in Viking populations, particularly Swedish Vikings who travelled east and mixed with Slavs before their descendants reached Romania. If a Romanian carries R1A, especially Z282, their ancestry links to the Slavic migrations and possibly to Viking admixture absorbed in Eastern Europe long before reaching Romanian lands. The third major haplogroup is E1B1B, especially V13, connecting Romanians to the Mediterranean, the ancient Balkans, and Thracian Illyrian populations. And then there is Haplogroup I1. Haplogroup Y1 appears in approximately 5% of Romanian populations. 5% sounds small, but its significance is enormous. I1 is the distinctly Scandinavian haplogroup. It is rare throughout most of Europe, but reaches frequencies of 30 to 40% in Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. I1 is found in Viking Age burials. It is carried by known Viking descendants. When I1 appears in Romanian DNA, it represents direct Scandinavian ancestry, not ancient shared heritage like I2A, not Slavic-mediated transfer like R1A might represent, but actual Scandinavian genes brought by people who travelled from the north to Romanian lands. If you are Romanian with haplogroup I1, the DNA evidence suggests you have direct Viking ancestry. Somewhere in your family tree, within the last 1,000 years, a Scandinavian ancestor contributed to your genetic heritage. 5% of Romanians means hundreds of thousands of people carrying this marker. Hundreds of thousands with direct genetic links to Scandinavia. The question is no longer whether Vikings reached Romania. The DNA proves they did. The question is how. What routes did they take? Why did they come? What happened when they arrived? Romania is not genetically uniform. Where you are from within the country affects what your DNA reveals. The Carpathian Mountains have acted not just as a geographic barrier, but as a genetic divider for thousands of years. Genetic studies reveal clear distinctions. Transylvania, isolated by mountains, developed genetic profiles closer to Central European populations. Austrians, Hungarians, Germans. Geography created a barrier that influenced which peoples settled, which trade routes passed through, which genetic influences dominated. The mountains channeled migrations around their edges rather than over their peaks. Peoples moving into Transylvania typically came from the west and north. Germanic tribes, later Hungarian settlers, Austrian influences. The genetic signature reflects this geography. Meanwhile, populations in Wallachia, Moldavia, and Dobruja show stronger similarities to Balkan and Slavic groups. These regions faced the full force of migrations from east and south. The Slavic waves hit these areas hardest. This regional difference matters for understanding Viking connections. When Vikings travelled toward Constantinople, they followed the Black Sea coast. They sailed past Dobruja. They traded in Romanian coastal ports. They travelled up the Danube, skirting southern Wallachia and Moldavia. Vikings rarely crossed the Carpathians into Transylvania. The genetic evidence reflects this pattern. Scandinavian markers appear more frequently in coastal and lowland populations than in mountain regions. If you are from Constanza, Galați, or the Danube Delta, your DNA has a higher probability of containing Scandinavian contributions than if you are from Brasov or Cluj-Napoca in Transylvania. But there is another genetic signal throughout all Romanian regions. Traces of Asian maternal lineages appear in every historical province. Small percentages, but consistently present. These genetic markers trace to steppe peoples, Scythians, Sarmatians, possibly Huns, later Cumans, and Pechenegs. For millennia, horse-riding nomads from Asia swept into Europe, and Romania sat directly in their path. Romania is literally a genetic crossroads. Ancient DNA from multiple continents flowing together. European Paleolithic hunters, Anatolian farmers, Mediterranean peoples, Slavic migrants, Germanic tribes, Turkic nomads, and Scandinavian seafarers. Understanding this complexity makes the Viking connection comprehensible. Vikings were simply one more group who passed through Romania, traded with Romanians, settled in the Romanian lands, and mixed their genes with existing populations. But Vikings brought something unique. They brought maritime technology that could traverse seas. They brought trade networks stretching from Baghdad to Iceland. They brought a warrior culture that would guard empires. And they brought DNA that can still be detected in Romanian blood 1,000 years later. In 2020, geneticists published the largest Viking DNA study ever conducted, analysing hundreds of ancient skeletons from Viking age sites across Europe. The results revolutionised understanding of who Vikings actually were. Vikings were genetically diverse, far more diverse than previously imagined. Some individuals buried as Vikings with full warrior grave goods carried little to no Scandinavian genetic ancestry. Others showed ancestry from the British Isles, Eastern Europe, even Mediterranean regions. The conclusion was clear. Viking identity was cultural rather than purely genetic. If you fought like a Viking, sailed like a Viking, lived by Viking customs, you were considered a Viking regardless of ancestry. But certain haplogroups appear with much higher frequency in Viking populations, serving as markers of Scandinavian lineage. Haplogroup I1 dominates. In Viking Age, Scandinavia, especially Sweden, I1 appears in 30 to 40% of samples. This is the distinctly Nordic marker. Vikings who carried I1 and travelled south toward the Black Sea could have passed this haplogroup to populations they encountered. When I1 appears in Romanian DNA today, it represents this direct Scandinavian contribution. But I1 is not the only marker. Haplogroup R1A also appears frequently in Viking populations, particularly among those who travelled east. Vikings travelled through Slavic lands. They established settlements in Russia, Novgorod, Kiev, Smolensk. They married Slavic women. These mixed populations then migrated further. When Slavic migrations swept into the Balkans, they potentially carried some Viking genetic material absorbed earlier in Eastern Europe. So R1A in Romanian populations could represent multiple sources, direct Slavic migrations or deeper Viking-Slavic mixing. Another significant lineage is N1-V-L29, found in Swedish Vikings and carried eastward during Varangian expansion. This marker follows the same routes that would bring Vikings into contact with Romanian lands. These findings show Viking identity was shaped as much by culture and movement as by ancestry. When Vikings reached Romanian populations, both sides were already genetically complex. Their encounters were between societies that were mixed, mobile, and interconnected. But beyond genetics, we have written proof of Viking-Romanian contact. On the Swedish island of Gotland stands a runestone carved around the year 1050. It commemorates a man named Hrodfus, a Varangian merchant. The inscription says he was betrayed and killed by the Blachmen, an Old Norse term meaning the Vlachs, the early Romanians. This runestone is one of the earliest written references to Romanian people. It proves that Vikings travelled into Romanian territory. Hrodfus died north of the Danube, somewhere in Wallachia or Moldavia. He was there on purpose, following established trade routes. The wording shows anger and shock, suggesting merchant killings were unusual. This implies Viking-Romanian interactions were normally peaceful. The runestone proves contact. but Romania itself also holds possible traces of Viking presence. Near Constanța lies the Murfatlar cave complex, carved by medieval monks. Among its hundreds of graffiti are dozens of ship carvings. Some resemble Viking vessels, spiral prows, rigging patterns, long narrow hulls. Others resemble Mediterranean ships. The debate continues. Are these Viking ships carved by visitors, or simply local depictions of ships seen passing by? The caves also contain characters resembling runes. They are not standard Norse runes, but similar enough to suggest exposure to runic writing. Although undeciphered, their presence shows cultural interaction. Modern technology may someday clarify these mysteries. Whether or not Vikings carved in Murfatlar, the caves existed on trade routes Vikings used. Scandinavian ships sailed past those cliffs for centuries. The possibility of Viking visitors is entirely plausible. Why were they there? The answer lies in Constantinople, Miklagard, the great city. The route from Sweden to Constantinople passed directly through lands that would become Romania. This route, known as the Eastern Way, was one of the most important trade networks of the medieval world. Vikings sailed from Sweden to Lake Ladoga to Novgorod, down the Dnieper River to the Black Sea. Then they hugged the western coastline, Bulgaria and Romania. They stopped in the Danube Delta. They traded in Constanța. Some travelled inland up the Danube. Hrodfus, the merchant killed by Vlachs, proves these inland journeys happened. Vikings didn't just pass by Romania, they entered it. Many of these travellers were not only merchants but warriors. Some journeyed to Constantinople to enter the Varangian Guard, the emperor's elite bodyguards. They served for years, earned wealth, and travelled back and forth along routes passing Romanian territories. Some returned home, others died abroad, and some settled in the south, marrying local women and leaving descendants whose DNA still carries Scandinavian signatures. Harald Hardrada, the future king of Norway, fled Constantinople in 1043 and escaped north along the Danube through lands inhabited by Romanians. For 3 centuries, thousands of Scandinavians travelled south and north through Romanian lands. Some stayed permanently. Their descendants are still there. Their legacy lives on in the DNA of modern Romanians, carried in haplogroups, in family lines, and in stories only now being rediscovered.